Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat, and today we're talking about a budget token landfall deck that's going to have us making a lot of tokens by our lands entering the battlefield with our commander, Maja, Bretagard Protector. You can expect to see cards that are making us draw because we have a bunch of creatures. When lands enter the battlefield, we're going to be making even more tokens, and we can then win the game by overwhelming our opponents by making our creatures huge. Let's jump right into it. Our commander is Maja, Bretagard Protector. For 2 green, white, it's a 2/3 human warrior. It's going to have our other creatures get +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So we have a lot of great ramp in the deck. It's going to make us a lot of tokens with cards like Harvest Season. For 2 and a green, it's a sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Well, if we have 6 1/1s tapped, we're going to get 6 basics on the battlefield, and that means 6 more 1/1s from our commander. Knight of the Reliquary. For 1 a green and a white, it's a 2/2 human knight. It gets +1/+1 for each land in our graveyard, which isn't what I was building around, but it can make this creature pretty huge. We can tap Knight of the Reliquary, sacrifice a forest or plains, search our library for a land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle our library. So this is a constant way to get those tokens from our commander, which is really sweet. Into the Wilds. For 3 and a green, it's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may put it onto the battlefield. So this isn't going to count for our land for turn that we play. So this is going to give us the opportunity to have up to 2 lands being put on our battlefield. That means 2 tokens, and the next card we draw can always be a non-land card that can help us draw even more cards to get more lands on our battlefield. Perilous Forays. For 3 green, it's an enchantment where we can pay 1 and sack a creature, search your library for a land card with a basic land type, put on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is going to get us a lot of landfall triggers, and since we're going to have a lot of creatures, this isn't going to hurt us at all. We're just getting a bunch of lands, and that land is replacing the creature we just sacrificed. Yasharn Implacable Earth. For 2 green and a white, it's a 4/4 elemental boar. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to search for a basic forest and a basic plains, put it into our hand. But what's really sweet is it says players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. This is so good. This means they can't use their Ashnod's Altar. This is going to shut off any politics deck, and I think this is a really great card to have in your deck, and it's a 4/4, which is going to help us be able to block and attack with it. So after all the ramp that we're doing, we have a lot of landfall triggers that we need to resolve, such as Zendikar's Royal. For 3 green, it's an enchantment. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. And since we're going to be playing a lot of lands, this is a great card to have, as well as Spore Mound. Pretty much the same thing, but it's a creature and it's a 3/3 fungus. When a land enters the battlefield under our control, we're creating a 1/1 green sapling creature token. Rampaging Balos. For 4 green, it's a 6/6 beast with trample, which is already nice by itself, but we get the landfall ability where when a land enters our battlefield, we're creating a 4/4 beast creature token, and again, we're having a lot of lands enter our battlefield, so we're going to have a ton of creatures. And last, for our landfall category, we got to talk about Avenger of Zendikar. For 5 green, it's a 5/5 elemental. This card is a powerhouse. When it enters the battlefield, we create 0/1 green plant creature tokens for each land we control. So let's say we only have 7, enough to cast Avenger of Zendikar. We have 7 0/1 green plant creature tokens. That doesn't seem very good, but wait for this. Whenever a land enters your battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control. So when a land enters our battlefield, we're giving all of our plants +1/+1 counters, and we're also getting a creature from our commander, and there's a bunch of ways to have our lands enter the battlefield, so this is an auto-include in my opinion. We're going to have a lot of card draw to make this deck work, so let's talk about drawing cards just by having a lot of creatures. Let's talk about Shamanic Revelation. For 3 green, it's a sorcery. Draw a card for each creature you control, and it has Ferocious, which we're not really paying attention to, but if we happen to have creatures with power 4 or greater at the time, we gain 4 life for each one of those. A similar card, but 1 more mana, is Collective Unconscious. We get to draw a card for each creature we control. Again, these are really powerful cards, especially if we have 10 creatures, we're drawing 10 cards, and that's really helpful for this deck. Idol of Oblivion. For 2 colorless, it's an artifact. We can tap it to draw a card. Activate this ability only if you created a token win this turn? Well, it's very likely because with our commander, just by playing a land, we're making a creature token, so that already gives us the ability to use Idol of Oblivion, and later we can pay 8 and tap it to sacrifice it to create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token, but again, I would just recommend using it for the card draw ability. Mentor of the Meek for 2 and a white. It's a 2/2 human soldier. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, draw a card. This is an amazing card. When we play our land for turn, we make that 1/1, right? We can then pay 1 mana to draw a card just for making a creature. And this is going to be one of those cards that you're going to want in this deck. This is going to be a card you're going to want in your deck for sure. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards off of Mentor of the Meek. And last, we're talking about Rites of Flourishing. For 2 and a green, it's an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, which is really helpful because the more cards we're drawing, the more cards we can play, and each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. So this means we get 2 triggers from our commander if we're getting those lands in our hand. Now you may look at this and say, well, why would I give my opponents this awesome ability as well? I don't want them playing cards, I don't want them drawing more cards. Well, the sweet thing about Commander is that this could be possibly used as a bribe. Our opponents will most likely not hit us because we're giving them more card draw, more lands to play, so we might be able to hold off our opponents as long as we have this card on the battlefield. As for the removal of the deck, we have Kabira Takedown for 1 and a white. It's an instant. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. And it also has a land on the other side, so if we really need that token from our commander or that landfall trigger, that's an option as well. Sundering Growth, we can pay green, white, or white and green to destroy target artifact or enchantment, then populate. So it's a removal spell, and we get to create another creature token from a token we already have, which that could be that 4/4 beast from Rampaging Baloths. And last for our removal, we're talking about Selesnya Eulogist for 2 and a green. It's a 3/3 Centaur Druid. We can pay 2 and a green to exile target creature card from a graveyard, then populate. Why this is so important to have is because our opponents have the possibility of having some crazy reanimate stuff going on in their graveyard. So instead of them getting their Grave Titan from their graveyard back to the battlefield, we have Selesnya taking care of that, and we also get to populate. Onto the board wipes, we have Hour of Reckoning for 4 white. It's a sorcery, and it has Convoke, which is going to help us be able to cast this for a little bit cheaper if we're tapping our creatures, which we have a lot of already. We can destroy all non-token creatures. This is going to hit our commander, but if we really need to have a board wipe, this is a great one to have, because we're still going to keep all of our tokens, and maybe we can win the game with that. Austere Command, this has to be my favorite board wipe right now. It's only $1 for 4 white. It's a sorcery. We can choose to destroy all artifacts, enchantments, creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. So this gives us a lot of options, and we usually pay 6 for a board wipe anyway. We can choose what we want to get rid of. This is a great one. And last is Martial Coup for X and 2 white. It's a sorcery. We can create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, but if X is 5 or more, we're destroying all other creatures. So we get to keep our creature tokens, and it's giving us the option to have a board wipe, which is really nice. We have ways to protect our creatures with Rootborne Defenses. It costs 2 and a white. It's an instant. We can populate, which is already what our deck is wanting to do, and our creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So we can do this in response to someone doing a board wipe, or we can make our creatures indestructible if our opponent decides to block with some crazy creatures. And then we have Make a Stand for 2 and a white. It's an instant. Creatures you control get +1/+0, so we can pump them up, and they also gain indestructible, which again is going to protect them from whatever's going on. And our final category is overwhelming our opponents. So this is pretty much the win cons of the deck. With cards like Champion of Lambholt. For 1 and 2 green, it's a 1/1 human warrior. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures you control. So already we're making our creatures unblockable by Champion of Lambholt having a lot of power. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, which we're going to have a lot of with our lands entering the battlefield, just from our commander, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lambholt. So we make Champion of Lambholt huge, all of our creatures are going to be unblockable, and we win the game. Mere Entity for 2 and a white. It's a 1/1 shapeshifter, and it's a changeling, which means it's every creature type, but that has no relevance. We can pay X. Until end of turn, creatures you control have base, power, and toughness XX, and gain all creature types. Why this is so good is because we can end up paying 5 mana. They also get that buff from our commander. We now have 6 6s, and there used to be just 1/1s. We're going to be dealing a lot of damage with this one. Overrun for 2 and 3 green. It's a sorcery. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. So with this and our commander's buff, we're looking at +4/+4 for all of our creatures. Those 1/1s are now 5/5s. and we're dealing a ton of damage. Devout Invocation for 6 and a white. It's a sorcery. Tap any number of untapped creatures you control. So let's say 10. Put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each creature tapped this way. If we tap those 10 1/1s we made however many turns ago, we get 10 4/4 white angel creature tokens. This is an insane card, and it's going to help us win the game really easily. And last, let's talk about McKindy Stampede for 3 white. It's a sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So this is a small buff to our creatures, but it's also a land if we need it to be. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to give a shout out to DJ for suggesting this commander. I didn't realize how awesome this deck would be. I've been kind of avoiding any kind of Selesnya deck. I don't really enjoy making those types of decks, but this one was the exception. I really enjoyed the going wide theme, and just by playing lands, we're getting 1/1 creatures. This was a really cool one, and if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, comment below what deck you want to see next, and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.